Good evening, folks, family, friends, loved ones, enemies, wizards, witches, mudbloods, muggles, people of Middle Earth, people of all four houses of Hogwarts and other wizarding schools in the world. Welcome to another episode of Disguise Coverage, part of the Cover One Sports Network, here on a new night and time. We've been rolling on Thursdays at 9 p.m. for a while, but for the regular season and potentially going forward, we're going to be rocking here in this Wednesday night, 7 p.m. time slot. Get your Wednesday started right here with Disguise Coverage, and then you're still going to have the Cover One Buffalo show that's coming up at 9 o'clock. So thank you for joining me here on this new night and this new time. And I'm your host, Anthony Prohaska. Find me on Twitter at pro__ant. That's pro2_ANT. Give me a follow on the old Twitter, or if follows aren't your thing, which is completely acceptable, I would gladly take, instead of a follow, a time machine that allows me to go back in time and find a way to communicate the Steelers' game plan to Sean McDermott so that the Buffalo Bills wouldn't lose in week one and thus ruin my Sunday and ruin my whole week up until this point. I'm not distraught. It's not the end of the world, but I'm not pleased, as is a majority of Bills Mafia. We're not happy. We're not pleased. It was also bad because they lost at 1 o'clock, so you had to sit with it the whole day. Last year, the losses to the Chiefs and the Titans were on those weird COVID weekdays. The Cardinals game came at a 4 o'clock time slot. So it was all these like wonkiness. This year was 1 o'clock. You had to deal with it the whole Sunday. It sucks. But yeah, I'd gladly take a time machine or a Twitter follow, whichever's your easier option there. Reptile, see you in the chat. How you doing? I appreciate you stopping by on tonight's show, which I'm very excited for. I hate saying that because that makes it sound like I'm not excited for other shows, which I am. But tonight's show, I am excited for. We're going to start out in a little bit talking about several major takeaways from the Bills-Steelers game. I don't want to dive too much into it. I feel like it's been talked about ad nauseum at this point. Myself and Greg and Aaron talked about a lot of things on the Cover One post game. You've seen a lot of things on Twitter. There's been a lot of breakdowns already going down. Oh, appreciate you, Omega Outlier. Imagine someone being sad when rocking such a killer shirt. I mean, yeah, this is the Mr. Stay Puft Marshmallow Man from Ghostbusters, but his head is off, so it makes it look like my head is for the, Mr. Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. But I appreciate you recognizing the shirt. Yeah, I don't want to drill too much into the Steelers game. I know a lot of it's been spoken about, but there are several things I want to bring up and address, and several points, not just because of the game in and of itself, but things that apply to the season as a whole and major takeaways that I feel we need to discuss because I think they affect the season holistically from start to finish, come to playoff time, throughout the progression of the rest of the regular season, all that, not just in a vacuum. So we're going to talk about some of those things in regards to Bills Steelers. And around the 7:30 mark, roughly a half hour from now, Kevin Dern from DolphinsTalk Weekly is going to be joining the show. I am extremely excited for him. He does tremendous work at Dolphins Talk. The whole crew over there at Dolphins Talk really does, a really great job. It's a shame they just have to talk about the Dolphins, but they are fantastic. Kevin is fantastic. I'm so excited for him to join the show tonight. He's going to lend us some insight and some knowledge and some detail into what's going on in the Dolphins world, how they feel coming off that win in week one against New England, what their game plan is going to look like coming into week two against the Bills on offense and defense. We're going to talk some Tua. We're going to talk some defensive guys that aren't named Xavier Howard or Byron Jones. We got a lot of good stuff on the docket tonight. And then, we're going to wrap it up with some Bills Dolphins talk in general, what to watch for, what we need to keep an eye on, important metrics and tendencies and efficiency points and all that stuff that you've come to know and love here on Disguise Coverage. But before we get into that, you may have noticed, as you did last week on the regular season premiere of Disguise Coverage, talked about new sponsorship. I'm going to throw up the little graphic there on the bottom now. This is sponsored by One Pie Pizza. And if you're watching the video here on YouTube, you will see, I'm so close. I'm still so bad at this. Right above me there, you got that One Pie Pizza logo, and that's there because Disguise Coverage is sponsored by One Pie Pizza. Traditional buffalo pizza. They make a tremendous sweet sauce. They make their own homemade blue cheese. When you purchase pizza, a cup of blue cheese already comes with it. I don't know what else and what more you want. What I also really love about what they do, and I don't think I mentioned it enough last week, they also sell like cannolis and little knickknacks and like that, but their focus is on they only sell pizza. That is their focus. And their belief is you focus on one thing, you do that one thing right, you make a quality product, you make it to the best of your ability, to as close to perfection as possible. That's what their aim is. And I think when you taste their pizza, you can see why that is their aim, because their pizza is very close to perfection. I love pizza. I've had it everywhere, especially in Buffalo. This is one of, if not the best pies I've ever had. Again, delicious sweet sauce pizza, homemade blue cheese. They're good people. They're good pizza. They are open Monday through Saturday, 11 to 8, or, and this may sound crazy, or until they sell out, which may seem crazy, like, oh, you can't sell out a pizza. They do. That's how good they are. That's how in demand they are. They sell out of pizza. So get your hands on some. And I'm tremendously proud to have them be a sponsor for the show. And their logo is, oh, so much closer this time. Their logo is awesome. Look at the color scheme. Look at the buffalo there. It's all good stuff. The good logo, good pizza, good blue cheese, all that stuff. I really appreciate the guys over there at One Pie Pizza. And lastly, as part of this intro, you guys, please rate and review and subscribe to Disguise coverage and to Cover One as a whole. I know it's corny. I mention it every week. Also, drop a like while you're here watching this video or whatever you are listening to this podcast on. A like goes a long way towards helping myself and Cover One to track and trend in front of more eyes and ears, as do rates and reviews and subscriptions. If you're listening on Apple iTunes, or even if you're watching here on YouTube, go over to Apple Podcasts, drop a nice review, tell me how great I am, or maybe how terrible I am. If that's how you feel, you'd be wrong. But I mean, hey, to each his own. So please rate and review and subscribe, drop a like, all that stuff. Go get yourself some One Pie Pizza. That's the intro for this. Now we're going to segue into some real football talk, which I know you guys are probably here for. Oh, I like some of the comments here from Omega Outlier. Disguise coverage is sponsored, also fueled by That Is Fair. I run on a good deal of pizza. I eat a lot of pizza, and now I exclusively eat One Pie Pizza. So that's pretty fair. And I love Eric in the Cover One account saying, "You down with OPP, aka One Pie Pizza?" And yeah, we are. That's even better. They got a clever, catchy, naughty by nature rap lingo to it. And I like Lone Wolf's comment here saying, "I'm down with OPP if the neighbor doesn't mind," with exclamation points. That's very fair. I like that. Oh, Griff already throwing a little bit of shade at Tua, calling him one read Tua. Fair. I'm interested to see what Kevin has to say about Tua and the offense in week one and how Tua has progressed, because there's a lot on his shoulders this year. I'm really excited to gain his insight. I watched I watched the entire Dolphins-Patriots game to scout both teams. You know, New England, I think, is going to be a factor in the AFC East this year, and as will Miami, but especially because Miami was our week two opponent. And their offense looked different. We're going to get into some of those metrics and things of why they looked different and how they looked different and what that means for week two. But it was an interesting game plan that they had. And again, it's all going to come down on Tua's shoulders, especially now that there's more weapons surrounding him. You've got Devontae Parker, but now you've added Jalen Waddle. You've added Will Fuller. I think Myles Gaskin is underrated. I like Mike Gesicki as a tight end. So we'll see, but we're going to break that down in a little bit, especially once Kevin gets here. But let's start with some Bills Steelers takeaways. And this is also a part two. I know everybody still feels very strongly about this Bills Steelers game. We all do. It was very disappointing. The performance, not just the loss, but I think the way the Bills lost, the performance, the lack of execution, the lack of follow through, and just going up 10-0 and then getting outscored in the second half pretty handily and giving up a block punt, just looking sloppy and shaky in a lot of ways. Things that are just uncharacteristic of a Buffalo Bills team. Hey, Jeff, I see you in the chat saying, "What's up, Prohaska?" I like when people call me by my last name. Also because there's another Anthony on Cover One. So when people just refer to Anthony from Cover One, sometimes it gets lost, but I appreciate the last name shout out. What's up, Jeff? John in the comments saying that he's past it. See, that's a good mindset. I'm past it. On to this week's game. The season is a marathon, not a sprint. 1,000%. Anything that happened in week one, I don't care if it was good or bad. I don't care if it was real football. I don't care if it was fantasy related. Week one is not the end all be all for what this season is going to be. Who you are in week one is not indicative of who you are come November and December and come playoff time, especially now with an extra week added, which may not seem like a lot, but again, it's an extra game. There is so much time between now and the end of the regular season. Teams do not know who they are at this point. A team's identity is not found or established after week one. So there's a lot to go. And again, we're on to Miami, but there are several takeaways that I wanted to break down and pull into this, especially in reference to Miami. And good comment here from Lone Wolf saying, "I still don't understand why they weren't providing more protection for Allen and kept going 4 and 5 receivers instead." And this is where I want to start in relation to the offensive line, a little bit of the game plan. But first, we're going to start with the offensive line. If you watch this show, which I'm thinking a lot of you do and hoping that a lot of you do. We talked on this show, and I talked on multiple shows in the offseason on Cover One in different podcasts, especially pertaining to draft season and free agent season. I wanted the Bills to upgrade the interior of the offensive line. I don't think that's a novel concept or thought that is unique to me. There were many others on the Cover One team who thought the same thing. There were many others in Bills Mafia who thought interior O-line was going to be a focus for this team. We saw John Feliciano come back in free agency, which I was okay with. If he was more of a depth lineman, or if he was the worst offensive lineman out of the starting five, to the point that Morse is going to be solid. You got Doc, you got Williams, you got Cody Ford potentially stepping up, or bringing in another guard. I see the question there. Is there any update on Starr? He practiced in a limited fashion today with his calf injury, so we'll see how he progresses. Tomorrow's practice is going to be very important, as is Friday. But he practiced in a limited fashion today, Justin. But I wasn't completely comfortable running the same offensive line back that we ran last year. And it wasn't just because of what happened in the Kansas City Chiefs game. I thought there were certain vulnerabilities in the Bills' offensive line, especially when it came to pass protection, in particular to John Feliciano. And again, as we're going through, you're welcome, Justin. As we're going through, I don't want to, again, drill home on anyone or hinge this on one particular person or thing. But we know the offensive line performed very poorly. Josh Allen was pressured on 41% of his dropbacks against the Steelers. There were times, Sean McDermott said in his press conference, where they just rushed 3 and they got a legit amount of pressure. They would just rush 3 or 4 and they got pressure consistently. Now, I know the thought from a lot of people, and again, why it's like, oh, it's one game, we'll move on to it. Not everybody has the front that the Pittsburgh Steelers have. People don't have a TJ Watt and a Cam Hayward and even a Melvin Ingram who looks completely rejuvenated. I think people forgot about how good he was with the Chargers because of the injuries that he's picked up. But when he was healthy, he and Bosa for the Chargers were terrors coming off the edge when they were both healthy and rolling. Ingram looks healthy, and now he's in a rotational role. That's a tremendous add for the Steelers. He banked on himself, signed a 1-year low value contract, banking on himself, hoping to cash in next year. But he looked great. And honestly, their whole defensive line looked great against the Bills' offensive line. And they didn't even have Stephon Tuitt, who I mentioned on the show last week, who was, I can't even find it in the notes. Oh, I can find it in the notes. Stephon Tuitt, who in 2020 was just put up monster numbers, with second only to Aaron Donald in terms of interior defensive line and pressures, third amongst interior D-line with 12 sacks. I think he was 4th in the NFL in pressures in 2020, and TJ Watt was also up there. You got 2 dudes over 70 dropping pressures. Just, he didn't even play. And we saw Hayward, Watt, and Melvin Ingram just wreak havoc. I'm worried for that going forward for several reasons. I see a lot of the comments starting to come in. Dawkins, who is usually good, wasn't good. I'm worried about him the least because despite what McDermott says or what anybody says, I think the COVID aspect is still there for him, whether he's still not feeling great or if he just is not 100% and in game shape and ready. Oh, Jeremy Kelly saying, can we take a minute to appreciate the t-shirt? Second call out for the shirt. I didn't think it would get this much attention. I'm going to show it again. Mr. Stay Puft Marshmallow shirt. I appreciate you guys. Yeah, it was just disconcerting to see how badly they played. And again, I know not everyone going forward has the Steelers defensive line, but there are several defensive lines in the AFC that the Bills are going to have to contend with that are very good. The Browns have Myles Garrett. The Colts with DeForest Buckner, and Kwity Paye looks pretty sweet. I know the Ravens defense got scored on a lot against the Raiders, but they still have a pretty good defense and a good defensive front with Calais Campbell. Owe looks very good. Tyus Bowser isn't bad. Then you still have the Steelers who you're going to have to contend with. You still have the Kansas City Chiefs, who showed that Chris Jones can almost single-handedly destroy a Bills game plan. If the offensive line doesn't come together in some form or fashion, I think that is a massive, massive thing. I don't think that's something that anyone really considered in 2021. I don't think anyone considered the offensive line being a liability in any way. I don't think anyone came in, and maybe I'm just speaking for myself here, but I don't think anyone came in thinking, well, the Bills have one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. The Bills are a top 10 offensive line. The Bills are a top 5, anything like that. I think they were middling. anywhere from like 15 to 18, maybe as high as like 14, 13-ish on any given week. But I didn't think the offensive line was a liability. That's even without the upgrades. I wanted Landon Dickerson or Creed Humphrey or Kendrick Green or a multitude of other guys. I really wanted Elijah Vera Tucker to somehow drop to the end of the first round, and he went to the Jets instead. Like, there were just a lot of interior offensive line reinforcements that I was hoping for the Bills to add. They did not. But regardless of that, the combination of Dawkins, Feliciano, Morse, Ford, and Darrell Williams, I did not think was a liability coming into the season. Did I think it was going to be the best offensive line in the NFL? No, I did not. But did I think it would be a liability? No. In week one, again, we're not blowing this out of proportion. We're not on the ledge. We're not saying, oh my God, this is terrible. The season's done. Everything is over. But in week one against the Steelers, and granted, again, the Steelers have a tremendous front and a tremendous defensive line. The Bills' offensive line was a liability. And good comment here from Lone Wolf. They drafted 2 tackles when the weakness was the interior of the O-line. I don't disagree. I saw the pics of Spencer Brown and Tommy Doyle and kind of just went, pardon me there. Yeah, I did kind of the same thing. I get the upside play with Spencer Brown and even with Doyle, and potentially having to look for a right tackle in a couple years, maybe when Darrell Williams isn't here anymore. But I wanted that interior O-line addressed. And it wasn't just honestly the interior. Like I mentioned Feliciano to start with this, but as several of you mentioned in the comments here, Deion Dawkins was a turnstile. We saw him just get blown by. He had 3 holds. Honestly, he probably could have gotten called for a lot more holds. Darrell Williams got beat. As someone else mentioned, I think it was Griff who mentioned in the comments, Cody Ford, I thought, played good. He was a bright spot. I liked Cody Ford. And to John's point, where there are offensive guard options at those picks that were better value, there definitely wasn't the second round. I know Creed Humphrey went after Boogie Basham. Kendrick Green went later in the draft than Spencer Brown. Again, hindsight is 20/20, but I wanted some kind of reinforcement in the interior of the offensive line. But regardless, I didn't think the O-line would be a liability without it. They were in week one. Now, if John Feliciano is the worst offensive lineman on this team, that's not terrible. If Dawkins plays to what he can, if Williams plays to what he can, I think Mitch Morse, who I know had a bad week in pass protection, Mitch Morse is still one of the best pin and pull and movement centers in the NFL. And he's tremendously smart. I think he does a lot for this offensive line. So you have Morse. If Cody Ford can continue to trend and ascend and play how he did in week one, see, this is a tremendous point. Also, what's up, Michael? Appreciate you stopping by after being able to see you twice this offseason at open practices. What's up? Michael's got a great point here. I love this. He says, I thought the guards could be if Feliciano wasn't the weakest link, though Ford is starting to show the necessary improvement, but the offensive tackles in Morse can't take a step back. That's exactly it right there. If John Feliciano is a starter on this team, I think we know at this point who John Feliciano is. Ford, there's still some question marks. Ford could continue to trend. He could get better. He could improve. He could be the prince that was promised at right guard, 1,000%. There's still a toss-up, right? Feliciano, we know who he is. We know the attitude. We know the locker room aspect. We know he struggles on the field in pass protection. We know that he's a better run blocker than pass protector, but we know he is not a stud. We know who he is, right? So if he's the weakest link, that can be fine. That just means Dawkins has to be Dawkins. Morse has to elevate and be what he can be. Ford has to play to the level that he was drafted to play at. And Darrell Williams has to play like the guy who was a midseason all-pro pick last year at right tackle. If you've got other guys slipping off like what we saw on Sunday where Dawkins had a horrible game and Williams had a horrible game, you can see what happened against the Steelers, I think happening with, I don't want to say regularity, but more often than not, I think a lot of people are kind of passing the buck for the performance in week one and saying, well, it was against the Steelers. Not everybody is the Steelers, will be fine. But again, 1, what happens if you have to play the Steelers in the playoffs? Not great. 2, there are several teams that have elite, I would say good to very good to elite defensive line play in the NFL. I didn't even mention the Steelers, who the Patriots, who I don't even really want to. Matt Judon is good. Uche looks good. If Barmore can be something in the middle, and again, Myles Garrett on the Browns, elite. Chris Jones on the Chiefs, elite, and already showed in the AFC Championship game that he can wreck us easily. Baltimore's got a very good front. The Colts, DeForest Buckner, I think, might be the most unheralded defensive lineman or maybe player in the NFL. He gets overshadowed by how great Darius Leonard is, which is fair because Leonard's amazing, might be the best linebacker in the NFL. But Buckner is great. His leverage, his length, his understanding of the game. Also, really good comment coming in the chat there. Steelers, Bucks, Chiefs, Browns, etc. Yeah, I'm not even talking about the NFC right now. That's a great point with the Bucks. I'm just thinking of the AFC. Like if we want to get to a Super Bowl, because that's the goal, to get to the Super Bowl and win it. To get through the AFC, we're going to face some good defensive lines with some elite players on those good defensive lines and some elite defensive lines as a whole. If the Bills' O-line is a liability, that's an equalizer for every single team, especially from the interior. That's the biggest thing. Myself and Greg and Aaron and Sterling a couple weeks ago here on Disguised Coverage, when we were grading our roster predictions for the year, we talked about, would you rather have, if you were a defense, would you rather have pressure generated from the outside or from the interior? And we all unanimously said the interior. And we were talking about in regards to the Bills defense, in regards to Ed Oliver and what he could do. Also, Ed Oliver played fantastic against the Steelers. But if you get pressure from the interior, you're done. The Steelers game showed that. TJ Watt had a good game, but Cam Hayward wrecked that game because we could not do anything on the interior to stop him. And a really good point there from John in the chat saying, we just need our O-line to not be speed bumps and we are okay. That's it. Just be middle of the road. And I think that can still happen, which is why I'm not pounding the table for DEFCON 1. I learned this week. I was going to say DEFCON 5, but apparently DEFCON 1 is the worst one. DEFCON 5 is better. Omega Outlier, if you're still in the chat here, confirm if I'm right about that. I don't know if I was right about that. And yeah, another comment here in the chat. A few of you were beating this drum, re the interior O-line going into the draft as well. Yeah, my formula and philosophy of what I wanted, granted, you had to see who was going to drop and when. But going into the draft, first 3 picks, whatever order, I wanted edge, interior O-line, corner, some kind of combination of that. I did not care how it came down. I just wanted interior O-line, could have been guard or center, but interior O-line, edge, corner with those first 3 picks. And I'm a little scared right now with the interior O-line. And, really good points here from Michael in the chat. They're not at Hayward's level, but there's Quinnen Williams for the Jets. And then, Wilkins in Miami. That can be an issue if the guards can't improve. And good comment there from John. I was really, John mentioned here, I actually thought Lamp was going to be on this line, was so disappointed. I thought so too. I didn't know if he would make it, but I wanted to see what he brought. I thought he was an interesting ad. And it sucked that he got hurt and never really got a chance to step in and do anything. But yeah, I wanted to see what Forrest Lamp could bring. But again, that's even another point, like no disrespect to Forrest Lamp. But if we're going into a season thinking, boy, I want to see what Forrest Lamp brings, your interior O-line isn't in great shape. No disrespect to Forrest Lamp. But I think several of us were thinking he could be something and hoping he would do something for this line. And if you're hoping and thinking for that, that means you're not in great shape. So again, hindsight is 2020 and it's only one game, but the O-line has to get better. The game against Miami is a very nice test for that because Miami's got a good defense, but they're not the most stout up front. I like Wilkins. Raekwon Davis is out, but they've got Wilkins on the interior. They play sound defense. They blitz. They do good things up front and combine with their coverage on the back end, which is very good. So it's not a world beater front, but it's good enough and a good defense holistically. I'm very interested to see how the Bills rebound against the Miami Dolphins. And we've seen several comments come through in regards to running the ball, and in reference, I'll just pull this comment up from Y saying, shouldn't Daboll call plays that somewhat compensate for his O-line deficiencies? That was my thought coming away from this game. I want to say this because I don't want anybody to jump all over me with it. I want the Bills to establish the run more. I don't think it needs to be a 60-40 split. I don't think we need to run the ball X amount of times, but I think the running game needs to be established earlier in games, and I think there needs to be the threat of the running game. What we saw against Pittsburgh was the Steelers just be able to sit back and say, okay, cool, they're not going to run the ball. We had a comment earlier in the show here talking about, Josh getting pressured and us continuing to just go 4 and 5 wides. And another comment, you guys have been great in the chat tonight, another comment coming through talking about how there seemed to be no real adjustment from Daboll and the offense, which is surprising considering how good of an adjustment the Bills would make half to half, quarter to quarter, drive to drive, game to game last year. It was one of their hallmarks, their ability to course correct and self-scout week to week, game to game. Again, drive to drive, almost play to play. They were tremendous with that, especially as the season progressed. And instead, against Pittsburgh, we just saw, nope, we're just going to keep doing this. We're just going to keep doing this. We're just going to keep doing this. And the Steelers, again, they have the front that allows them to do that. But they just sat and, okay, cool. We're just going to rush 3 or 4. We're going to drop 8 or 7. We're going to play our coverage. The Steelers play a little more palms coverage than a majority of other teams in the league do, but they just played zone and made life very difficult for Josh Allen. They're well coached. They were well schemed. I would like to see the Bills run the ball earlier and establish it to, at the very least, make the defense have to account and be like, are they going to run it here? Maybe make the play action a little more viable. We saw the Bills go like play action in like the 3rd and 4th quarter, and nobody bit. It was just kind of like, oh, they're not actually going to run it. Like we saw a lot of, shotgun, fake to Singletary and throw the quick little screen to Beasley, and nobody honored the run. Also, I want to point out that if you're looking at Devin Singletary's stat line for the game as a whole, don't use that as a metric to say, we can run the football, we should have run it more, look how good Devin Singletary did. A lot of those runs, granted, it wasn't game over and wasn't garbage time, but a lot of those runs came later in the game, and a lot of those yards came later in the game, so don't be fooled by his overall stat line and say, oh man, we should have run the ball, this would have looked great. But that being said, this is, Michael, you're killing it tonight, my man. Michael, again, you're saying Daboll should have made some adjustments once the O-line couldn't protect and Josh wasn't checking down. That's 1,000%. And yeah, another comment coming through. First half Singletary wasn't bad. No, he was not in the first half. I just want to see us run the ball more to establish it, to be able to generate that running game and make defenses have to account for it and have it be a threat and have it be something that teams have to account for. Because if you've got a good defense who can drop and play coverage like we started to see in the playoffs last year and against certain teams, and if you can bring pressure up front with your front 3 or your front 4 and drop that coverage in the back, it's going to make life very difficult. And I'm going to continue to say this is a talk for another time, but the method to beating the Kansas City Chiefs, I think in order to succeed in beating the Kansas City Chiefs, we have to run the ball in some form or fashion. Again, we don't have to change everything. We don't have to suddenly become a 70-30 split or 60-40, but we need to be more effective when we run. We need to be able to have defenses think it's a threat and have to honor more play action. Also, Josh is tremendous off of play action. Majority of quarterbacks are. That would be awesome if Josh can be able to look towards that aspect of his game, have that running game, and also Singletary look good, take some pressure off. So I wanted it established in general as a philosophy a little more early, but especially after we started to see the poor performance of the O-line, especially on the interior. It was nerve-wracking, and it was a threat, and it made me very worried the entire game that we just seemed to not be able to protect Josh, and more importantly, that we didn't adjust and account for what we were seeing from the Steelers, which was disappointing. And yeah, great comment to round it out here from MS saying, last year we made halftime adjustments to neutralize Hayward's disruption. Not so much this year. That's correct. Also, again, last year, not to blow it out of proportion, we beat the Steelers last year, but it was a close game. That Taron Johnson pick 6 kind of swung things a lot. But Greg Thompson from Cover One tweeted out some things last week or a couple days ago about Josh Allen's numbers versus Pittsburgh this year and his numbers versus Pittsburgh last year, and they're eerily similar. I think we kind of shade those two games differently because we won one and lost one. But yeah, I want to see more effective running, more establishing of the run early to make defenses honor it. I think it helps Josh in the pass game. I also think it helps negate or mitigate protection issues up front if we can run the ball more or have defenders at the very least not be able to just pin their ears back and tee off because they know, oh, it's going to be a pass, it's going to be a pass, it's going to be a pass. So yeah, that's there 1,000%. And we're going to talk about some other things for Bill Steelers as we start to wrap things up a little bit later. But now I want to start to pivot because I've got a guest for this show. I mentioned it earlier in this episode, and you should see it from the title of this episode, Know Thy Enemy, Buffalo Bills versus Pittsburgh Steelers with Kevin Dern. So I'm going to welcome in Mr. Kevin Dern very shortly. Again, he's from DolphinsTalk Weekly. I've got his Twitter handle up there on the screen at KevinMD4. He's a very busy man with life. He's got a 1-year-old. He's got a wife. I've got a wife. I don't have a kid, but I can imagine what that workload is like in addition to the Dolphins stuff and work and all these things. So he has taken time out of his busy day to be on the phone with us while he's driving. I look at the multitasking ability. I'm tremendously impressed. And I'm going to bring him on right now, Mr. Kevin Dern. Kevin, how's it going?
I'm good, man. How are you? That intro is way too kind.
No, you are tremendous. I was searching for, some Dolphins people to bring on. I started going through the Dolphins podcasting ranks, and you were one of the first I came across, and I was like, oh, this guy's fantastic. And I'm a big fan of people who know their teams, but also are level-headed and aren't like, well, here's why they're going to win because the other team sucks. And I was like, no, I don't want to talk to that person. So yeah, I love your takes and your analysis, and I appreciate you stopping by as you drive home in the beautiful sunshine.
Yeah, well, thank you. I apologize for the glare in northern Kentucky right now, but we're heading west, so right into the sun. But yeah, happy to talk some football.
Yeah, 1,000%. And actually, the sunlight is looking good. Your whole setup looks better than mine, even though I'm seated in yeah, yours looks fantastic. Well done. So, you and I started, texting and going back and forth on stuff for this game. And, we'll jump right into it because this is a big question for me, with what is the mentality of the Dolphins coming into this game, and how much does this game mean from a Miami perspective? Miami comes into this game 1-0. They just beat New England to open the season, which is a tremendous boon for them. The Bills come in 0-1. This is Miami's home opener. The Bills, not even technically, the Bills kept Miami out of the playoffs last year. All these factors, the Week 17 loss last year, Miami being 1-0, beating New England, the Bills being 0-1, all these things. Is there any extra juice to this game, and what does this game mean from a Miami perspective for them?
Well, you'd never know it if you listen to Brian Flores talk, because he's always the, one meeting, one practice, one day at a time. But I think the game is huge for Miami, and I think in total it's bigger for the Dolphins than it is for Buffalo. And I guess number one, the obvious thing is Miami would have 2 division wins right off the bat. So that's always a nice thing to have in your back pocket. And then I would say, I don't know if Brian Flores would necessarily agree or think it, but for me as a fan, Miami's 0-4 against Buffalo since Flores took over, and 2 of those games weren't even close. And I would argue that the Dolphins road game in 2019, they probably caught Buffalo, sleepwalking for a half, and then Buffalo dominated the rest of the game and won that one, I think, by like 10 or 11, if I remember right. So it's not like Miami's really played the Bills very tough the past 2 years, other than maybe week 2 last year. And I guess, for my money, other than the Chiefs, I think Buffalo is the most talented team in the AFC. So I think that's a pretty big litmus test, for Miami from a roster perspective, and, how far are you really going to get? And it was actually kind of interesting to me back in the spring and summer. Sorry, I'm going over some construction stuff.
No worries, man. You're doing great.
Yeah.
Just don't crash. Just make sure you drive safe.
So I actually I called it like Catching Buffalo. And I did like a mini series on my own podcast. And I kind of did 3 separate episodes of what Miami has to do to get to where Buffalo is. Because, from my perspective, it seems like the Bills started their whole rebuilding project like a year or 2 before Miami did. You guys made the playoffs with Tyrod Taylor the one year and still said, we still got to get better at quarterback. And I think that was one cycle Miami kind of got caught in too long with Ryan Tannehill.
Okay.
So, to me, I think Buffalo and Kansas City are the gold standard in the AFC at this point. That's where you've got to try and get. And a win over Buffalo, to me at least, would signal that, Miami is ready to compete at that level. I don't know that they'll get there yet. Obviously, there's a lot of football to play this week and thereafter, but it would be a huge win. And, if Miami does win, I still think it's easier for Buffalo to go from 0-2 to get right back into the divisional race than it would be for Miami to go 1-1 and have that, have Buffalo having that tiebreaker. If that makes sense.
No, 1,000% that makes sense. I've been thinking about it from both perspectives, and we've seen comments come in the live chat here talking about how big the game is for both teams. I've been thinking of it from both perspectives. Like, if the Bills lose this game, they're 0-2 in the AFC, 0-1 in the division. They've lost to a team that is kind of like a sexy dark horse darling this year again, like they were last year. And I think if the Bills lose, they allow Miami to gain even more momentum than they already have, and also welcome in a bunch of doubt and potential naysayers to come in and be like, you know what, maybe Josh Allen was a fluke last year, and maybe the Bills, there's too much expectation and too much hype. But then you've got that Miami perspective. And so I love your perspective there, because I've been weighing it back and forth of like, who does this game mean more to? Who needs this game more? Not that, again, we're talking week 2 in September. It's not like this game is, well, whoever loses this is screwed and the season's done. But I think it definitely carries some weight and definitely has some implications. And one quick question I want to add in follow-up to that, would a win in week 2 against the Bills mean more for the Dolphins than the week 1 win against New England?
Oh, man. I would say yes, just because now that we've played New England again already this year, Brian Flores has won 3 of the 5 times, and he's still 0-4 against Buffalo. That's really been the monkey on his back. I think Miami's won 3 out of the 4 they've played the Jets in the 2 years he's been the coach. So, and to me at this point, Buffalo's the best team in the AFC East, certainly a notch above the Patriots and way above the Jets in terms of talent. So, for me personally, a win against Buffalo would be bigger to me. Obviously, winning in Foxborough is always tough, but Miami did that in the first year Brian Flores was the coach with Tom Brady still there. So you kind of already crossed that one off your list mentally, I think. So for me, a win this week would be bigger than week 1.
And see, that's my fear. I shouldn't say fear, but my thought from a Bills loss perspective is losing to Miami. I don't know if a loss for Buffalo means more for the Bills in terms of the loss, or if the win means more for Miami because of exactly what you said. Like, there is that little bit of a monkey of people knowing, well, Josh Allen always kills the Dolphins. You mentioned it already when you came on. We texted about it, yesterday that, like a couple of those games were boat races as you threw out there. And it was like, no, don't jinx it. Like, I'm superstitious. Like, I don't want to hear that. But if Flores and this Dolphins team can start out 2-0, and they beat New England in New England, they beat the Bills, who were a popular Super Bowl pick with a popular MVP pick, and a team that Brian Flores has not been successful against. Yeah, I think this win would mean huge things for Miami in terms of momentum and mentality and everything. So I'd love to hear you say that. That was good stuff. So as we move on, we've already briefly discussed it. We talked about the rebuild a little bit. You mentioned Josh Allen. You mentioned Ryan Tannehill. Now Miami's got their guy, Mr. Tua Tagovailoa. We thought they had him last year too, and then Fitzpatrick started, and then Tua started, and then it was Fitz, and then Tua was like the closer. It was like this weird baseball bullpen, starting pitcher, relief pitcher scenario, but now Tua is the guy. And I went and watched back, even though I was depressed and didn't want to ever hear about football ever again after the Bills lost. But I went and watched the whole Miami and New England game just to see what was going on with Miami and going on with New England. And I saw more downfield throws from Tua than I anticipated. And then I went and checked the metrics earlier in the week after. And so in week 1, which, you know this because we went over some notes and stuff. So in week 1, Tua was 7th in the NFL in intended air yards per throw at 9.4. He was 28th in 2020 with 7.7 yards per throw. So my question for you is, this year in 2021, is this Dolphins offense geared more towards downfield and intermediate throws, or is what we saw in week 1 more product of a specific game plan against New England and they thought they could take advantage? Or again, is it because, we've got guys like Jalen Waddle who can stretch the field now, so we should see more downfield and vertical aspects of the game from Miami's offense?
Yeah, well, I guess first of all, isn't it the truth when your team loses, you're kind of down in the dumps till like Wednesday or Thursday the next week?
Oh, and what was worse, I 1,000%. And I spoke about it to lead off the show last year when the Bills lost. So they lost the 3 regular season games. The Chiefs and Titans ones were like those weird COVID weeks. So it was like midweek, nighttime, and that was it. The Cardinals game was a 4:00 game. I haven't had a Bills loss at 1:00 in so long. So it just killed my whole Sunday. I didn't want to watch the 4:00 games. I didn't want to watch the Sunday games. I'm still upset now. Yeah, 1,000%.
Yeah. So is Will Fuller, because he was suspended in week 1 and wasn't able to play.
Yep.
So I think we'll see if that downfield passing attack increases this week, because he is back. He practiced today. He missed most of camp with an injury. I think if I've got my timeline right, he only made the first or second practice, and then that was really it. No preseason games for him. But I do think, last year Miami was kind of the victim of circumstance. Like, Tua only got to play a game and a quarter with Preston Williams. Then he broke his foot, so he was out. Devontae Parker was already hampered at the time with a hamstring injury and then had an ankle injury down the stretch. And then Jakeem Grant's just, never been able to kind of rise to that consistent level you'd like him to be at. So I would say that, and part of it, last year they didn't have that threat, but I think Tua is much more confident and much more aggressive with his throws. And I think the interesting thing is, and I'm going to cite Chris Kaufman, who goes by CK Parrott on Twitter. He had a great thread about the Patriots game. The interesting thing about the Patriots is they played a lot more snaps with 7 and 8 guys in coverage than I would have expected. I thought they would have brought the house and used their odd Mac O package and all the different pass rush games and stuff that they use. They more or less basically just said, okay, let's take Tua's first read away and see what he can do. And, Tua with that extra time was able to throw some of those deep dig routes to Devontae Parker, threw some slot fades to Jalen Waddle, threw a fade outside, even had the little automatic thing to Savon Ahmed, which Devin McCourty unfortunately sniffed out right from the start, but, forced Tua to throw it 5 yards out of bounds, which, I guess is better than him trying to make a play and throwing a pick. True. But I think there was a concerted effort to be more aggressive, and they certainly took some shot plays with play action. I think it was more of an on-the-fly adjustment to how the Patriots were playing them, because if you watch the first 2 drives, everything was RPO-based and short, get the ball out quick. Only when they realized New England wasn't trying to bring the house, in passing situations, did they start taking some of those shots. So I think we'll get a better feel for it, this week and maybe the next couple weeks thereafter. But it's hard to say without having seen that full complement of receivers, just because Will Fuller wasn't part of it. So, I'd say it's a little bit of both for the time being.
Okay. And quick little follow-up with that. You started to talk about, Tua looking a bit different this year. Have you seen, as a person who follows the Dolphins tremendously close, have you seen a difference this year between year 2 Tua versus year 1 Tua?
Yeah. One of the other guys who writes for Dolphins Talk, he goes by the handle Reason. I think it's The Real Reason on Twitter, did an interview with Tua's personal trainer. And the trainer had basically said that, Tua gained 7 pounds of muscle, really transformed his body. Last year at the end of the season, he could not stand on one leg with his bad leg, so he just wasn't fully healthy last year. He clearly looks a little bit more like muscular and defined. He really didn't have many chances to kind of scramble and run against the Patriots other than the very first drive when he ran in for the touchdown, but that was so wide open. Yeah. He definitely wasn't going full speed. So it's hard to kind of say, but like some of the stuff he did in the preseason game against Atlanta looked much more crisp and much more quick than he was last year. That said, though, I think there's still going to be, 1 to 3 plays every game where he kind of makes those decisions where, instead of throwing it away or bailing out of the pocket, I'm going to try and play hero ball and make something happen. And that's ultimately what bit him on the one interception he did throw.
Yeah.
So I think if he can eliminate that stuff, that's going to be, kind of the mark for me of him, taking that step from year 1 to year 2.
Nice. You also mentioned Will Fuller, and I wanted to touch on him briefly. What, if he debuts, which we expect him to, what do you expect from him if he plays, and how much of an impact do you think he can have on this Dolphins offense? I mean, I think Devontae Parker is tremendously underrated. I think a lot of people know how good Jalen Waddle is and how highly touted he was. And then Will Fuller can just take the top off any defense at any point with his speed. So, yeah, what does he bring, and what do you expect from him?
Yeah, I think some of the value is going to be hidden because now you have the opportunity to put Will Fuller on one side and, Jalen Waddle and Parker on the other. So just having that speed presence probably opens stuff up underneath for, guys like Myles Gaskin, who actually led the team in catches last week. Mike Gesicki, who, New England made a pretty strong concerted effort to take him away. He didn't have a single catch. I think only had 2 targets.
Correct.
So I think that's part of it. But I think with Fuller, you have that ability now to throw some of these shorter passes and run mesh concepts with short crossing routes and stuff, and him being able to get yards after catch. That was such a weakness for Miami a year ago. Excuse me. It was such a weakness for Miami a year ago. I think for me, that's kind of going to be the big impact he makes, is being able to get yards after catch.
You mentioned Myles Gaskin. I've been a big fan of Myles Gaskin all offseason. I have him on several fantasy teams. I like what he brings from a fantasy floor perspective, but also from an NFL perspective. He was 3rd in the NFL last year in terms of red zone touches per game at 3.9. And one of the guys he was behind was Dalvin Cook. Like, he was in tremendous company with that. And Flores and the team have really good faith in him. And as you mentioned, so he led the team in targets last week, and majority of the targets were really dominated by Devontae Parker, Jalen Waddle, and Myles Gaskin. They all made significant plays. They all saw significant targets from Tua. Is there any one player in your mind that the Bills defense has to account for, or is Tua, and by extension, I guess this Dolphins offense, is it more of like, we're going to spread it around, get everybody involved, scheme it up, or is there one person that needs to be key?
Yeah, I think, depending on what your definition of a bell cow running back is in today's NFL, I think Myles Gaskin's going to be the guy that gets the most touches. Okay. The interesting thing to me last week was he only had 9 carries.
Yeah, 5 carries for 49 yards.
Those came on the very first drive of the game. Part of the issue was New England 13-minute, so that probably plays the NFL. Right? But I do think in the passing game they'll try and spread it around. I think they left a lot of meat on the bone in terms of ways to get Jalen Waddle the ball. Okay. They showed some jet sweeps and screens and things like that in the preseason that they didn't really do a whole bunch of against New England. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice here.
No worries. Yeah, you're probably yelling all weekend celebrating the win and you have no voice left to speak.
But I think they'll make a concerted effort to get Waddle and Gesicki and Gaskin the football a lot. And then, to me, especially against a defense like Buffalo, who, at least on paper, looks like they have a good enough pass rush to do some damage against Miami's offensive line. Yeah, it's probably a little more ancillary this week because there's just going to be a more in my opinion, more of an effort to get the ball out quick.
Gotcha. And as we start to switch and pivot a little bit to the defensive side of things. So I know we've been talking a lot here about offense. Tua and Parker getting the ball out quick, dispersing everything, the vertical passing game. No, I got you. You were cutting it out. You came back through there. We talked about the offense here, Tua and Gaskin and everybody, and what Miami's plan on offense is. But the defense, I think, deserves some shine. They played so well for Miami last year, and I think a lot of the conversation always seems to center back to Xavier Howard and Byron Jones. Those are the big names on the defense, and I guess rightly so for one way or another. They're both tremendous. Xavier Howard, leading the league in interceptions last year and getting double-digit interceptions, and then wanting to be paid handsomely for it. Who, aside from those two, who else has impressed you on the defense, and who's somebody that, Bills fans should look out for and expect plays from on Sunday?
Yeah, I guess maybe the first name that comes to mind, and maybe just because I had very minimal expectations for what his role would be, was Jason Mccourty. He ended up starting at free safety last week and made a couple nice plays in the passing game. They rotated a lot of safeties in the game. Like, you'll see Mccourty and Rowe were the two starters, but you'll see Brandon Jones and Javon Holland. Holland actually made some nice plays in the running game, and for being, kind of a smaller guy at safety, was pretty impressive to me. So
I thought he was an interesting pick coming out of Oregon. I liked him in Oregon, so I'm glad that you mentioned him. I wanted you to touch on him a little bit.
Yeah, he did really well against the run. I don't recall him having like any super challenging like coverage assignments or anything like that, but played a pretty nice game in the limited snaps that he got. And then I would say the other guy to watch would be Sam Agwavon, who came from the CFL 3 years ago, and he's kind of carved out a nice little niche as a pass rushing linebacker on third downs. Had a couple nice plays against the Patriots, but he had a 4-sack game in the preseason against Atlanta, and basically is the reason they got rid of Bernard McKinney before the season started. So I would say those three names, McCourty, Holland, and Agwavon, would be the three guys to kind of watch outside of the big names.
Yeah, Guavin led Miami in pressures in week 1 with 4. I know that because I researched it to see who led Miami, and it was him. And Cam Hayward led the Steelers against the Bills with 12. So that goes to show you just how rough of a game that Bills O-line had. Yeah, so I looked up Agwavin because I wanted to be able to pronounce his name. So I looked up some YouTube interviews and videos with him, and saw all the CFL stuff from him. He has a really cool story. He went to that CFL camp with over 300 people, was the only one that got offered a contract. And here he is, leading the Dolphins in pressures in week 1. So it's a cool story. I mean, I hope he doesn't do good against the Bills, but I hope he does good in his career and future, because that's an awesome story and good for him. And so, continuing in that trend and in the defense, we saw what the Steelers did against the Bills in week 1. They have a tremendous front, but they were able to rush 3 and able to rush 4, and TJ Watt and Cam Hayward and Melvin Ingram just caused chaos nonstop, especially from the interior. And, we know Raekwon Davis is out, but I think Christian Wilkins is a force inside for Miami. But we saw that game plan from the Steelers of dropping 7 to 8, playing coverage, making Josh Allen have to be precise and surgical and trying to generate pressure up front. How do you see the Dolphins approaching the Bills offense? How do you expect them to defend the Bills? What type of coverages and pressure packages should we expect to see from Miami on Sunday against the Bills?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question, because I believe Josh Allen is 5-1 against Miami in the 3 years he's been in the league now. So, hopefully luck is on their side for starters. But I think, the biggest thing I would look at is that week 2 game last year. Xavier Howard wasn't quite 100%, so he never got to really cover Stephon Diggs. And then Byron Jones got hurt 3 plays into the game, never came back. So, and then I think they kind of got, on this path at the end of the year where they had been using that cover 0 package so often. And then Brian Dable, ends up being the one guy to kind of solve it. Excuse me. And I really don't think you can live in that package, especially against someone like Josh Allen, who, just has an otherworldly arm and is able to throw the ball downfield. Clearly, Brian Dable's a very good coordinator and was able to kind of schematically figure out how to block that up long enough to hit, some double moves and things like that off of it. So the one game I kind of go back to last year with Miami that I think may help them a little bit is when they played San Francisco in week 5, who runs all those play action things, all those crossers, which, Stephon Diggs seemingly killed him on last year.
Yeah.
So a lot of that game was like cover 6 and cover 6 buzz. And if you can kind of live in some of that stuff and then mix in, last week they were doing a lot of big nickel looks with 3 safeties, but Miami's 3 safeties, Holland, Eric Rowe, and Jason McCourty have all played corner at one point or another. So they're a little bit better at covering than normal. So I think you'll see some of that stuff with 3 safety looks on the field, cover 6 buzz, cover 1. I don't know how much cover 0 they'll mix in, just because Josh Allen and Brian Dable seem to just carve that up last year for the most part in week 17. So that's kind of my take. As far as the pressure stuff goes, Miami didn't really use a whole lot of their 5-0 package, which is, basically the same thing the Patriots do on third downs. Miami really kind of had to blitz Mac Jones to get pressure on him. I think they ended up getting 8 hits and 1 sack. They had another sack negated by a penalty. But, you'd love to see Emmanuel Ogbah kind of get going a little bit. Jalen Phillips missed a lot of training camp. You'd love to see him do a little bit better than he did week 1. As far as interior pressure, for whatever reason, they really limited Zach Sealer's snap count. I think he only had like 24 or 28 snaps out of like 75, which was surprising because he's generally one of their better interior rushers. I thought they played Adam Butler a little bit too much and Zach Sealer not enough. So maybe they kind of balanced that out, especially in the wake of not having Raekwon Davis this week. So, yeah, I don't know. I think you're kind of damned if you do and damned if you don't. If you try and pressure Josh Allen, I think he's got the arm, and Buffalo clearly has the scheme to beat that cover 0 stuff. If you sit back there and try and spy him, that hasn't worked in, any of the games that Miami's played Buffalo since Allen's been the quarterback. And, and come to think of it now, that the one game Miami did win, I think was basically a Charles Clay drop.
Yeah, the last play. Yep.
Away from being a Bills win instead. So, I hope Josh Boyer and Brian Flores have a great game plan. I don't really know what it is. That's just kind of my take based on what Miami has done, this year and last year. So I guess we'll see.
Oof. Well, you've been tremendous, Kevin. I appreciate you taking the time and being able to make our schedules work, and you driving fantastically while also giving us tremendous analysis and insight at the same time. You were awesome. Thank you so much for dropping by. And again, taking the time and being so great and knowledgeable as you always are. And, just to be safe, why don't you drop some knowledge on the people, where they can find you, what you do, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so I write for DolphinsTalk.com, and then I have my own podcast, which is DolphinsTalk Weekly. At this point, just because of work, and I'm actually going back to school for my MBA right now, I'm basically just doing a podcast every Sunday night, recapping the game from that day. But you can find me there. You can find me on Twitter at KevinMD4. And just wanted to give a shout out to Bills Mafia real quick. For those that don't know, I was born and raised in Cincinnati, Ohio. At my previous job, we did a lot of work with Cincinnati Children's, where Andy Dalton did a lot of his work while he was in town with the Bengals. I know after the Bengals got that win a couple years ago against Baltimore, everyone started making donations. So, I know what a great organization Children's Hospital is. So, thank you to the Bills Mafia that contributed. That was awesome. Very, very cool to see that happen. So, that was awesome.
Oh man, I don't think you could have, gotten any higher in my book, but that probably pushed you higher. I was not expecting that. That's so awesome, man. I'm sure, again, Bills Mafia loves cover 1 and disguise coverage, or at least I hope they do. So I'm sure they'll appreciate those, parting words from you and the kindness. And that's awesome that you were, involved in that kind of stuff. So thank you so much for just being a good person, for the Bills Mafia shout out, and for dropping by. You were great. Thank you so much, Kev.
Yeah. Thanks, Anthony. Thanks for having me on. I really enjoyed it.
You got it. Hopefully we'll do it again sometime.
Yeah, sounds good.
Drive safe.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
No worries. Bye. Man, I enjoyed the hell out of that. I know it got choppy a little bit and some parts as he was driving, but that's exactly like you said there, Jason. Donating to any children's hospital is awesome. That was a really cool piece. I didn't know that, and I didn't expect that, and that was a really cool thing from Kevin. And what a great guest, super knowledgeable, super insightful. And yeah, I apologize for any signal or service issues during it, but we are people live in real lives. We got to make time. And, I appreciate him being able to take the time and offer tremendous insight, which, we're at the hour mark. We're going to dive into a little more and digest some of the things that Kevin said and Kevin mentioned and put it with some of the analytics and notes and things that I have for this game. But before I do that, I wanted to mention this cool little sponsor and work that we've got going on here. So you saw it on the Cover One post game on Sunday. You may have seen it on the Hoof last night. Handsome Jack, local band from Buffalo. They are fantastic. Got a clip of their new debut video. You may have seen Greg tweet some stuff out with Brian Dable pretending to be their front man and cool things. But this is Handsome Jack. Here's their song. Roll it. It's tremendous. Take a peek.
Roll it, motion, took it to that emotion. Yeah, you got to roll it, motion, took it to that emotion. You got to roll it, motion, took it to that emotion. Yeah, you got to roll it.
I'm not just saying it. Greg played that on Sunday during the post game, and the Roll It part was stuck in my head for a good day and a half. That was Roll It, new single from Handsome Jack. They're fantastic. We're awesome. We're super thankful that they reached out to us to help, spread their word and their music, which is, again, tremendously talented. And also the video is awesome. You saw a little Highmark Stadium in the background there as they were pushing the van. So go check out Handsome Jack. Check out the new single. Check out all their works. They got a new album coming out. So awesome stuff from Handsome Jack. And now we start to digest some of the things that Kevin mentioned. Again, super thankful to Kevin for stopping by. And I wanted to touch on a couple more things regarding Tua. I mentioned it in my one question to him about the intended air yards. I think, hell yeah, Rich putting the comment in, solid song. It is a solid song. And that was only like a 25-second snippet. So imagine how much better the full song is. But yeah, that clip there, it's just a good, I don't know, if you're walking around the house or walking to your car, just kind of sitting there, it's a good nod your head, tap your foot, say roll it, and it works. So a couple of things I wanted to point out about Tua, because I thought it was interesting in that first game. So, I mentioned it in terms of the intended air yards. So in week 1 against the Patriots, Tua's completed air yards in week 1 were 5.1, which was 23rd in the NFL. For reference, in 2020, he was 28th in the NFL with completed air yards of 5.3. So we all know a lot of his completions were in the very short areas of the field. All the jokes were that he couldn't throw deep. He could only make one read. He would dump it down or check it down to running backs or Gasicki or anything like that. So you have the completed air yards numbers, which are a little low. But his intended air yards, as I mentioned in the question to Kevin, were 9.4 in week 1, which was 7th in the entire NFL. And again, in 2020, his intended air yards were 7.7, which was also 28th, like his completed air yards were. I think this offense is going to be more vertically based. You heard Kevin touch on it a little bit. They took some shots last week, and they did that even before Will Fuller potentially being on the field like he would be this week. Will Fuller gives them another guy who can stretch the field, open up the deeper intermediate for Devontae Parker and Jalen Waddle. And also, Jalen Waddle can really get downfield. He's somebody who can stretch the field much like Will Fuller can. I wanted to share this graphic here of, let's see here. There we go. Oh, let me take myself out. There we go. So the graphic here showing This is Tua's pass chart from NFL Next Gen Stats. Mafia Numbers pulled this for me and gave it to him. Max Robleski, follow him on Twitter at Mafia Numbers. So this is showing you Tua's pass chart in week 1. And granted, you got some incompletions there deep, but you see a decent amount of throws to the right. We see the short area completions to the right, a little more to the left, but we see those deep shots. Granted, they were incomplete, but we see more attempts of him starting to stretch the field. We see more attempts around the 15-yard mark. There's a decent amount of throws. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 immediately right between 10 and 20 yards. And then you've got the 2 above 25, pushing 30, including a completion down there. So we saw more intended air yards from Tua in week 1. Again, at 9.4 intended air yards per throw, which was 7th in the NFL. And again, that's without Will Fuller. We saw what the Steelers started to do against Levi Wallace in the second half against the Steelers. We saw them target him a little bit with Deontay Johnson. We saw them start to stretch the field with Chase Claypool. I think you might see that again from Miami. I know Tua is known as like a check down guy and a short guy and short and intermediate. And so in one read Tua and all the jokes and everything like that. But I think we may see more vertical attack from the Dolphins. And like Kevin mentioned it, Will Fuller only adds to that. You know, that passing chart is from week 1 where there was no Will Fuller. Now you add another guy who, Will Fuller might be faster than Jalen Waddle. I don't think he's as good of a route runner, but you've now got Waddle, you've got Fuller. I love this comment here from Jason, you know, mentioning the short passes, looking for yards after catch. That's a really good way for the Dolphins to succeed. Pardon me there. We saw a lot of plays to Myles Gaskin just with yards after catch, as Kevin alluded to, and my fantasy team knows about, where they would just let Gaskin out of the backfield on a little option route or a little out or a swing pass and dump it off to him for a 4-yard completion, and then he would take it for like 10, 11 yards. You know, he's shifty, he's quick. Waddle is great after the catch. Will Fuller is great after the catch. Parker isn't the easiest guy to bring down because of how big and athletic he is. I think seeing what Miami does on Sunday is going to be very interesting because I think, again, a lot of people have it in their head of like, well, he can't throw deep or he's got a weak arm or he's just going to go short. I think we may see some more throws to try and stretch the field on Sunday. As this passing chart from week 1 shows, again, it's only one game, so sample size is there. It was an issue there. But couple that with what Kevin mentioned, and, you know, that's what we could potentially see from the Miami Dolphins come on Sunday. And talk about the offensive line for the Dolphins. They gave up 13 pressures to the Patriots in week 1, 13 pressures, 2 sacks. For reference, the Bills had 8 pressures versus the Steelers, and they had 2 sacks. Also within offensive line aspects and offense as a whole, Myles Gaskin. So the Dolphins offense as a whole, 23 rushes, 74 yards. As Kevin mentioned, Myles Gaskin had 9 carries for 49 yards, as he also touched on a majority of Myles Gaskin's carries came early. I'm interested to see what they do in the run against the Bills. The Bills' run defense was very good in week 1. The Bills' defense as a whole, and this is one of the Bills-Steelers takeaways that, you know, I wanted to talk about that I think is important. The Bills' defense played good, but especially their run defense. Their fits were solid. Their integrity was good. Granted, the Steelers' offensive line doesn't have continuity or experience yet, but the Bills did their job, and they also did their job without Star Lotulelei. It would be nice to see them continue that against a better offensive line. I don't think Miami's offensive line is full of world beaters, but their offensive line is better to me than what the Steelers' offensive line is. And we know Miami's going to mix in some runs. Again, they had 23 of them in week 1 against New England. I think Miami is going to try and run the ball. They want to make things easier on Tua. They want to open up the play action. And they want to be able to take some shots like Kevin mentioned. I want to see how that Bills defense stands against that run. We know the run was an issue last year, and we hope that Starr would remedy a lot of that. But again, Starr didn't play in week 1, and I know it was against a weaker offensive line. But Ed Oliver looked good. Butler even looked decent. Ed Oliver was tremendous. The run fits from the second level were good. So the Bills held their own against the run in week 1. And I love this comment here from Dylan saying, I thought Rousseau looked great in run D, but he could have been a bit better in pass rush, but overall very solid debut. Yeah, I wanted to caution everyone for the pass rush in general against the Steelers. They get the ball out so quick. Ben with that quick release. I didn't think a lot of sacks would come And also wanted to temper the expectations for Rousseau because he is up against full-time starters now and just to see what would happen. But I think you're spot on here. I liked his run support. I liked the way he set the edge. He had a real nice tackle on Najee Harris early where he set the edge and used his long arm to keep the right tackle, and control him. And then Najee came inside and he got Najee with one arm, got his hand right on the ball. He almost ripped the ball from Najee Harris, but Najee held on to it, and Rousseau pulled so hard that he just took Najee Harris right down. So yeah, he had a solid debut, nothing to the level of the preseason play that we saw, but a solid enough debut from Rousseau. And again, on that defensive line, I thought Ed Oliver was the star as a whole. Also, in terms of things from the Dolphins offense, as Kevin mentioned, and I wanted to get into a little bit here, we saw Devontae Parker and Jalen Waddle work a lot of intermediate and deep routes for Miami in week 1 against the Patriots. We saw Myles Gaskin on those option routes out of the backfield. We also saw a really nice touchdown for Miami to Jalen Waddle where they ran some misdirection and pre-snap motion and play action all on one play to open up some things for Waddle, confuse the Patriots defense, and then take advantage of Waddle's speed around the corner to get to the pylon. So a lot of good things from the Dolphins offense that they can build upon. Again, not a tremendous outing. They pulled up 17 points. They didn't set the world on fire. But they have some things to work on and build on. And I also like what Kevin mentioned too, the kind of mistake aspect of Tua's game. He had a play against New England where in the fourth where he just kind of threw up a ball with 8 minutes left midfield, threw it up and he got picked off and he got intercepted. And the only reason that didn't come back to bite the Dolphins was because Damian Harris or the Patriots fumbled in the red zone on that next drive. But New England started driving, Harris fumbles, Miami was able to ice the game and take it out. But there is still that aspect of Tua's game where we might not see the most efficient performance, or maybe he's still going to make those, rookie mistakes or those kind of quote unquote boneheaded plays. Kevin mentioned it, the ability of him negatively to kind of just like make a player do something that you're like, oh my God, like, why are you doing that? Like this interception was one of those examples. Like, why would you throw that? Why would you do that? Especially 8 minutes left around midfield with the score of the game was in situation. That wasn't good situational football at all. But as as Kevin mentioned, the Dolphins know that, and they know Tua has that aspect in his game. It'll be interesting to see if it rears its ugly head against the Bills. It'll be nice if it did, if the Bills could take advantage and get some turnovers. They had the one against Pittsburgh. Should have had another one. That was an interception for Tre'Davious White. I don't like that it was called a defensive pass interference or holding, whatever they called on Trey. I didn't think it was either. I thought he played coverage. I thought he barely touched him. But again, in today's NFL, it's hard to touch anyone because if you breathe on someone too hard or look at someone the wrong way or give someone, like a mean look, it's very easy to get flagged. And that's what happened to Trey. I also wanted to pull up another graphic here. So this is the Miami Dolphins personnel grouping frequency, some of them here. So this is 11 personnel, meaning 1 running back, 1 tight end, aka 3 wide receivers. I think you're going to see more of this on Sunday. Now that Will Fuller is back, I think you're going to see a lot more 11 personnel. This is 2020, their personnel grouping frequency. So you see that they were in 11%. They were in 11 personnel 56% of the time, which was 21st in the NFL. I would expect to see more of this on Sunday. I think they want to take advantage of Parker and Waddle and a returning Will Fuller. And then you got Gaskin at tight end. You got Myles Gaskin coming out of the backfield. That offense, that personnel grouping could present problems for this defense, for any defense. You have the ability to run the ball, but you still have the ability to pass out of it with multi-looks. You had the misdirection, the pre-snap motion, all the opportunities to confuse a defense, mislead a defense. And then again, it's easy to pass out of 11 personnel. The Bills love to do that, but you can also run out of it. And when you have a back like Gaskin, who is a legitimate dual threat in terms of the run and the pass, an interesting, opportunity for the Bills defense in terms of the mental aspect and the execution piece, because I think Miami is going to do some things that are going to stress the mental side of things for the Bills defense and also that athletic side. Again, when you have a look like 11 personnel with the personnel packaging and the personnel that the Dolphins have, You're a threat to both run and pass. That's stressing the mentals. And then when you add the speed and the athleticism that the Dolphins offense has, it'll be a nice opportunity for the Bills defense to be able to show what they can do. You know, Pittsburgh presented their own problems. I think Miami presents a different matchup aspect, but it'll be interesting to see what we get from that. And also within that, we have the defensive side of the ball from the Miami Dolphins. So some of the things that Miami can do to affect the Bills, and especially seeing what the Steelers did in week 1 against the Bills. But before I get to that, I wanted to bring up one other sponsor that we have for this episode. So I mentioned One Pie Pizza. Again, I want to continue to mention One Pie Pizza, traditional buffalo pizza, delicious sweet sauce pie, homemade blue cheese. When you order any pizza, you automatically get a cup of blue cheese. They focus on pizza. That is their thing. They sell pizza. They believe in doing one thing right and going above and beyond and making a quality product. Go out to One Pie Pizza. Again, the menu and everything for One Pie Pizza can be found in the episode description on whatever platform you're watching or listening to this episode of Disguise coverage on, as is the link for the IDP Army. So IDP Army, mentioned a couple weeks ago, mostly IDP, all fantasy football. The IDP Army is a fantasy sports media brand that creates entertaining and insightful fantasy football content and products with a holistic approach to fantasy football. Their flagship product, the Ultimate IDP Index, is the #1 resource for IDP fantasy football players. It is an index of tiered rankings, detailed player profiles, going back all the way to 2017, contract information, suggested trade values, weekly snap percentage trackers, and suggested start sits that are updated daily in season. It was created and curated by Jordan Rains, founder of the IDP Army, and Jordan has been a top 5 draft expert for IDP on Fantasy Pros the past 2 seasons. Go to idparmy.com for more details. Subscribe to the IDP Army channel on YouTube for weekly start sit live stream questions and answers before every kickoff on Sundays starting at 11 a.m. Go check out the IDP Army for you guys. I'm proud to have that sponsorship. Ooh, great question here from Chris. Does One Pie deliver nationally? I wish they did. I wish the world could experience One Pie Pizza. I love it. It's the only pizza I've had since I've had One Pie Pizza. I have not had any other pizza in Buffalo since I've had it. I have pizza multiple times a week. That means I go to One Pie Pizza multiple times a week. It is delicious. Again, they focus on doing one thing and doing that one thing right, and that's make a quality pie, quality pizza. And again, I love the homemade blue cheese piece. And they're open 11 to 8 Monday through Saturdays or until they're sold out. Man, great stuff from One Pie Pizza. I wish they delivered nationally, Chris. I really wish they did. And as we start to bring it back, start to wind down here in this Know Thy Enemy episode, Buffalo Bills versus Miami Dolphins, I wanted to mention some defensive things for Miami, which I thought was very interesting going into this game. So in 2020, Miami was 5th in the entire NFL in blitz percentage, roughly around 33%. And also in 2020, their third down defense is what they like to do is on third down, they like to go to dime defense. So that means about 6 defensive backs or more. So they like to go to their dime defenses, and then they go to that dime defense and they run 5-man pressure. So they're rushing 5, and then they've got 6 in coverage, and it's usually 6 defensive backs in the coverage. So you got those 5-man pressures. They run man coverage on the back end, sometimes with a single high safety, so a cover 1 look, no pun intended. And they have an 84.6% win rate in odd fronts on third down. They have a 47% blitz rate on third down. And they have a negative, that's good for a defense, negative 0.374 EPA per play on third downs, which is the best in the NFL. The conversion percent that they allowed for offenses on third down is only 31%. And they have an 80.8 defense grade, on third downs in 2020. Whew, a lot to digest there. But one of the strengths of the Bills last year was their third down conversion percentage. They were the best in the NFL. They were tremendous, constantly being able to move the ball, execute, move the ball up and down the field, and just really do a whole bunch of good stuff on third downs. And Miami's defense is good on third downs defensively. And when you have a secondary that's led by Xavier Howard and Byron Jones, guys who can lock up and play good coverage, or guys like rookie Javon Holland or Eric Rowe, who used to be with the Patriots, guys who have that versatility, to cover in the slot, to drop down, to play zone, to play man, it only increases the complexity that a defense can have. And also wanted to throw out some 2020 numbers there for the Dolphins as well. So they were in cover one, again, no pun intended. So that means man coverage with a single high safety over the top. They were in cover one roughly 30% of the time, and they were in cover three, which is a zone coverage the Bills run a lot, roughly 31% of the time. So over 60% of the Dolphins' defensive snaps last year came with a single high safety look. I would expect that to continue going into this game against the Bills. I think you're going to see man coverage on the back end because the Dolphins can play it, because they've got Byron Jones, because they've got Xavier Howard. But I would expect them to see what the Steelers did last week and try and take advantage of that coverage piece. The Bills, again, Miami doesn't have the front that the Steelers have. No one does. The Steelers front is tremendous, but the Steelers, I don't think they have as good of coverage potential from the corner position as the Miami Dolphins do. Again, Xavier Howard is very, very good. And I love the point that Kevin had last year. Byron Jones went down very early in that first matchup against the Buffalo Bills. I thought that was a huge, huge piece. Who knows how that game turns out offensively for the Bills if Jones stays in, but Diggs started to really eat once Byron Jones went down. And that's a big loss when you've got the weapons that the Bills have and you lose one of your top two corners who you pay a lot of money to and you invest a lot of time and resources into. That affected the game big time last year in week 2. So interested in hearing those numbers and seeing what Miami likes to do on third down and what they do as a whole in terms of their blitz rate, their coverages on the back end. I would expect to continue to see single high safety. They're going to rely on Howard and Jones being able to cover their ends individually, whether it's in man coverage or zone coverage, then running a safety over the top. Again, over 60% of their looks last year came with a single high safety, whether it was cover 1 or cover 3. So expect that single high look, which means you've got three. Really, you got the two corners and the safety, the single high safety deep, which allows you to have more guys underneath, make things a little bit more difficult for Josh Allen, make the windows a little bit tighter. If Miami can get some pressure up front with their defensive line, we'll see what kind of havoc and chaos they can potentially cause the Buffalo Bills. But man, it's going to be a big game this Sunday. We're going to start to wind down here on this episode of Disguised Coverage as I throw up the Toodles You Guys banner there. If you're listening, I just threw that up. We should kind of understand that now at this point. But any last minute questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, please feel free to throw them into the chat as we start to wind down here. And it's a big game. Kevin alluded to it and mentioned to it. It's a big game for Miami, but I think it's a big game for the Bills. I don't think if the Bills lose, I don't think it's a death knell to the season, but it would really suck for momentum and for the mentality of this team and the fan base, for a season that has such high hopes and expectations. If you come in and you lose to the Steelers in a game that everybody thought you would win, and then you lose to Miami, a divisional game against an upstart team, the whole people don't believe in Tua. Some people do believe in Tua. All of a sudden, Tua, even though Bruce Nolan wins are not a QB stat whatsoever. The story will be that Tua just beat Josh Allen. Flores gets his win over Josh Allen, something that hasn't really been done, gets the monkey off the Dolphins' back. Who knows where they can go from here, yada, yada, all this momentum talk. We saw it last year when the Bills were doing tremendous. There were people that were picking the Dolphins to come out midseason and win this division when they started to go on their run. So if the Bills lose this game, it just gives that argument even more credence and credibility. So, big game. Big game on Sunday for the Buffalo Bills. I want to thank everyone who rode with me live here on this episode. And if you didn't ride live with me, but you are listening or watching this episode now, thank you very much for listening, downloading, tuning in, watching, whatever have you. I greatly appreciate any and every listen and positive piece of feedback in every way, shape, or form. So thank you so much to, everybody who just supports myself and Cover One in any way, shape, or form. You guys mean the world to us. We say it every week on every show, but it is the truth. We wouldn't be where we are without you guys. So thank you very much for tuning in, listening, watching, downloading. Please rate and review and subscribe to Disguised Coverage, to Cover One as a whole. Please drop a like. I know, again, it's cheesy and it's corny, but it goes a long way towards helping myself and Cover One to track and trend and get in front of more eyes and ears. Thank you very much for tuning in to this episode. Also, an announcement, there will be no Disguise coverage next week. I am out of town for the entire week next week, and I'm unable to do Disguise coverage. I will not be on the Cover One post-game show this week with Greg and Aaron, but I will be back to do the post-game for the Bills-Washington football team game. So the next time you see me on a Cover One channel will be after the Bills-Washington game on that Sunday post-game, and then I'll be back at it with your regularly scheduled Disguise coverage Wednesdays live at 7 p.m. I hope you like the new time and the new schedule. Start to get adjusted to it. Join me on Wednesdays live at 7 p.m. Very big thank you to Kevin Dern from DolphinsTalk Weekly. He was awesome. Again, I know there was some of the choppiness with the reception and coverage, but he was awesome. Tremendous detail. I know he's a Dolphins guy, but go give him a follow. He's just good for any football fan. He'll make you a better fan, just like Cover One does. Give Kevin Dern a follow. Check him out there on the old Twitter and Dolphins Talk. And thank you very much to One Pie Pizza for, again, being the presenting sponsor of this show. Again, the website for the menu and all the information for One Pie Pizza can be found in the description of this episode. It's hyperlink. Clicked it. It'll take you to the menu that will show you everything they have. It'll take you to the page that shows their address, phone number, all that stuff. Go get yourself some One Pie Pizza. Go check out the IDP Army, mostly IDP, all fantasy football. Go check them out. And again, take a nice listen to some Handsome Jack. That was a nice little tune that we played during the middle of the show. Go check them out. They're fantastic. Their single Roll It just dropped. Check out their new album, all their works. Good Buffalo band, good Buffalo pizza, good, hopefully, Buffalo Bills this Sunday against the Miami Dolphins. I hope you and your family and friends and loved ones all stay safe and are doing well. I will not see you for a week as I am out of town. As always, go Bills, and I will see you in 2 weeks.